It is 6 o'clock Eastern, which means it's 5 o'clock Central. Thank you, everyone, so much, and welcome to the final session of GameRT's March mini conference on building character. I'm Danielle Costello. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a research and instruction librarian at the University of Georgia, where I teach library instruction and create game programming. I'm also the incoming president of this amazing roundtable, and most importantly, the host for this very last session. So, once more, this session will run from now until 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, and it's being recorded and it'll be live streamed to Twitch. All recordings of this session will be available on our Twitch channel after this event, and copies of the slide for presentations are linked in the conference group resource doc, which will be linked by our beautiful tech team in chat as I'm talking. So for this session, we have three presenters, followed up by a Q&A. If you have any questions for the presenters, please let us know who the question is for. And then if you're in Zoom, please use the Zoom QA feature. There'll be a link for how to use that feature also linked inside the chat. If you're watching on Twitch, our tech team will snag your questions and add them to the Zoom Q&A. And again, that Q&A will happen after all of our presenters have presented their presentations today. I've said that a lot, so sorry. So with that said, let's roll into our last session block of the day. Our first presenter, Josh Bycer, will be presenting Building Character, the Positives of Character Creation. And Josh, if you'd like to pull up your slides so we make sure all is well.
All right, 1 second. I will do that now.
Absolutely.
And there we go.
Perfect. Looking good. It's all yours.
All right, thanks, Danielle. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Building Character. We're going to be talking about kind of the positives of personalization and why people have really grown to love this idea of creating their own characters, be it in tabletop, video games, and just like the healthy atmosphere it can embody. As a brief introduction about who I am, I run the website and channel Game Wisdom, and my specialization is in talking about game design and the game industry. I have interviewed developers from all around the world. I have written books, and I can talk at length about game design in any way, shape, or form, and why this next 15 minutes is going to be very challenging for me. But when we talk about personalization and customization in games, it all begins and ends with character creators and editors. And I'll talk a little bit more or give briefly about some tips about making your own editor later on in this presentation. But the goal here is to allow someone to create a character of their choosing. This has been seen in many, many, many different games over the years. And while it did start out popular in RPG style games, it has since been moved on to action games, any title that allows someone to be creative or allow them to create themselves in it. And this can happen very large or very small. Some games, it's just about pick a hairstyle, pick a hair color, a shirt, you're done. Other games let you design down to the exact bone structure of someone's nose or their chin line. And people have spent as much and as little time as they want on this. Now, many games over the years have allowed you to personalize a fixed character. So this is something that the person has not created, but is kind of in universe for it. And this has been very popular in some of the bigger budget games, such as Mass Effect and the Assassin's Creed titles. But while it's similar, it doesn't have the same impact and it doesn't really hit what we want when we talk about personalization for the consumer. Personalization can come in many different forms. Some games, it is just about adding weird stuff to someone, such as this guy who apparently likes cats. It can be as detailed as something as far as like the painting of a character down to the exact detail every which way, such as what people do with figurines when it comes to tabletop and so on. Many games allow you go completely original, creating whatever it is that you would like. A creature with as many arms, legs, teeth, uh, lines, fins, whatever. And this has also allowed people to create their very own favorite properties in games. Give someone a character creator and they will create their favorite anime, cartoon, whoever in it. And this has, of course, extended out into cosplay. And cosplay has become a major industry and a major way for people to kind of be inspired and to show off in places all around the world. And sometimes personalization can get a little weird, as we saw with Street Fighter 6 and whatever these guys are. Now, it's very important quickly to define the difference between customization and personalization, as they're often conflated. Customization is about how someone actually behaves in the game. So, this is their class, what weapon they use, skills, perks, powers, whatever. Personalization is about the aesthetics. How does this character look in this world? Do they have capes, glowy orbs? Do they have like a little fanfare that plays behind them? And for many games, you can have two characters that look exactly alike and they behave completely differently, or two characters who behave completely differently and look exactly alike from each other. And most importantly, games these days will separate fashion from functionality. They want people to be given the space to be creative and not have it affect their bottom line or their DPS. Even in something as challenging as Dark Souls and Souls Lakes, where danger and destruction can be around any corner and you're always in the threat, people still need to look fashionable, and Fashion Souls is a real and very credible way of playing these games. Now, for many modern games these days, they what they will allow you to do is set what's kind of like a default or stock look for your character. Well, what this is basically, let's say you have that preferred cape, cowl, pants, shirt combination that you love and you never want to change. When you set a default look, no matter what else you pull in your character, it will not change it. And this is a very important point about personalization. You don't want it to interfere with how someone builds their character from a customization point of view, or vice versa. And many games will allow people to even get custom or wacky costumes, especially fighting games, single player games. Again, any way to make someone stand out from everyone else. Now, a very important point about personalization is you can't force it. You can't put 10 people in a room and say, make an original character. I want 5 pages of background biography for them, and I want it done in the next hour. Personalization is a very, no pun intended, personal task or personal aspect. You can't force someone to do it. And there are people who will go very far into this, or they will go not at all. There is someone who will design that 20-page biography of their character down to their exact family tree. Then there'll be people like me who, as long as the character has brown hair, brown eyes, cut, print, done, let's get into it. And most importantly, there is no right way to personalize. There should never be like the standard or the preferred way. And many creators will allow people just to have different color palettes, different color schemes for their characters, and they are not going to try and stifle creativity in any way, shape, or form. Now, personalization, like I said, is long standing. It was first kind of really big in the tabletop industry in the mid 70s through the 80s, and it really blew up in video games in the 2000s and especially the 2010s with the rise of live service, mobile games, and so on. People like to be them. And the you that you can show online can either be like the perfect idealized version of yourself, the version of yourself that you don't really show people, or you can just go crazy and make whatever it is that you want. But it's always about standing out. No one wants to just be generic warrior C and have 10,000 of them wandering around. And many, many games have used this and have exploited this to make tons and tons of money. And there are some downsides to this that's very important to understand. Personalization is always about being able to stand out. And it can lead to situations where, especially kids in the social groups, that if they don't have the hot new character skin or the very fancy wizard hat, then they will be left out of the group that does. And there's been, unfortunately, a lot of news stories over the past 10 years of kids being bullied for not having the right character or the right skin at the time, wherever is trending. And this has been a major source of monetization for a lot of views. And again, I could talk about this for like the next 3 hours, and I do not have the time. But you do not want to create this atmosphere of the haves versus the have-nots. And that also means never setting any options as the best. You can have lots of hats, shirts, belts, pants, sneakers, sandals, whatever, but you don't want to find this is the number one hat, or these are the super elite sneakers that only the best people get to wear. Because this has been something that's been used by a lot of video games. And like I said, it has earned lots and lots and lots of money over the years. They'll have the basic skin, the elite skin, the super duper skin, the super duper duper skin. And people will spend, and they have spent lots of money and lots of time trying to acquire them. For you, you want to give people enough options that they can determine what they want. Do they want mullets? Do they want beards on top of beards? Ballerina outfits, pumpkin heads, whatever. You want to give them a very wide berth to design what they want. And most importantly, never assign any kind of intrinsic advantage to wearing certain clothing or certain options. You don't want to have someone that says, okay, the entire group wears cowboy hats. Everyone gets 10 extra points because this will lead to people being ostracized for not wanting to do it. And again, it creates this haves versus the have-nots atmosphere. Personalization is at its best when it allows people to interact and team up with each other. This is why plenty of MMOs over the years, such as Final Fantasy, I want to say 13 or 14, I always mix which one is the MMO one up, have done exceptionally well in this respect. It's always about having people meet up and work together, whether they are major friends in real life, anonymous, or maybe they know each other just from playing these games. It's always about teamwork. That you want a group of people, and this of course extends into tabletop games as well, to succeed as a group. You can have someone make that clutch play that leads a team to victory, but at the end of the day, it's about the individuals coming together to achieve a greater goal. And they can each do it in their own unique and personalized way, so much the better. And this again has led to very popular forms of socializing online. 20 years ago was all about MMOs. These days, it's always about games that have live service, guilds, groups, and even stuff you can do in your own local libraries or video game clubs. These allow people to communicate with each other, and especially online, without any kind of barriers. For someone like me who unfortunately can't do a lot of traveling, being able to do stuff via Zoom or interact with people in games and online has been fantastic in terms of allowing me to become more sociable and meet more people than I would have ever had possible just here in my local area. But when you're dealing with online groups, chat, whatever, it is still important to moderate and make sure you know who is chatting with everyone. And as another major point, this is where it has become very big for introverts. I am a 10 for 10 on the introvert scale. I took a psychology test during college to prove it. And being able to communicate and interact with small groups, and especially online, makes it a lot easier to socialize. It is far better to talk to someone when you don't have to worry about any kind of facial mannerisms or anything like kind of hurting yourself in your real life or day-to-day life when you can do it all online. It can still be difficult, but this does open up the way for more people to have a chance to communicate. Now, for trying to get someone who's introverted to do something like this, you want to avoid any kind of games that dictate a leader. Because the worst thing for someone who has trouble talking in front of a group or being in control is to tell them, hey, you're now the leader, tell everyone what to do, and it's all going to be on you to succeed or fail. And it's still very important, even in small groups, to make sure that everyone knows each other, that there aren't going to be any issues like that. And again, for people who are introverted, you can't force this. You can't demand someone to become friendly and be the life of a party. And again, it's why these smaller groups are really great to get someone to maybe just peek their head out of their shell once in a while. And of course, as I'm sure everyone here knows by now, tabletop games are a huge facet of this. There are games as big and as little as you want, from simple board games that can take 20 to 30 minutes, lengthy tabletop RPG campaigns. This is a great way to have a cooperative atmosphere and to have people come together as a group, maybe once a week, maybe several times, and interact and grow some camaraderie among themselves. And there are plenty of tips to get kids and people who aren't used to this into them. I found this website from a friend who offers some very basic strategies, and again, I won't read too much into it here for time. But again, you want to present things in a way that it's very easy to learn. You're not going to show someone who's never played a tabletop game for the first time a 15-hour long massive campaign. And we'll talk more about pre-made characters next when it comes to having editors. Editors, again, can be as big, as small, detailed, or as generic as you want. One of the best things you can do is provide plenty of base or stock options. Again, there are people who will want to look at every single thing imaginable, and someone who just wants, give me a character, let's get into it. You and one of the good examples that was given to me by a friend is D&D Beyond as basically an online site that let you create Dungeons and Dragons character sheets. And these are a great way to start. It's a great way to let someone be creative and make something of themselves that they would like. Now, if you want to create like your own generic editor, be it for a tabletop game, a basic video game, online, whatever, these are the absolute basic things you must include in it. These are the kind of generic attributes that anyone can start to create something personal with. But there is always room for more. As games have gone more advanced, so has their editors. And you can just go down a rabbit hole in terms of all different shapes, body types, species, whatever, for people to create. But the most important thing is that no matter how many glasses, pants, belt buckle, shoes, socks, sandals, eyes, eyebrows, whatever you have in your game or in your tabletop, in terms of how much is needed, it's always going to be more. People will always want to have some way to make their own character, to even create something just completely wild or fancy in it. And it is something, again, that has become bigger and bigger over the years. And if you want to instill any kind of sense of ownership or personalization, you need to consider it. So, to wrap things up for this quick talk, personalization allows someone to create something that they can bond with or something that is personal to them, whether it is a character that they spend years defining or a few seconds hitting random on a character editor a few times. It is something that you can use in any kind of game that involves role playing, tabletop, or anything that involves people coming together as a group to accomplish a task, where each person can stand out both in terms of how they play and in terms of what they wear. And with that, that does it for my presentation. So if you'd like to follow me and the stuff that I do, these are the best places to follow me. I am always available to talk game design for years and years of time. And I have many different books on various topics available literally everywhere. And that's going to do it for me.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Josh. If anybody has any questions, I again urge you all to put them in the chats, to put them in Twitch as well. And now on to Jonathan deHaan with building character around games through pedagogy, dream, research, play, discussion, analyze, and participate. Jonathan, are you ready to roll?
I am. Yep.
Excellent.
Let's see. It looks like, thank you. Looks
You
like
should be
Josh
able
is,
to, yep,
there we
there
go.
we go.
Now we can do it. There we go.
Okay,
All right.
excellent.
Can you see it okay? Yeah, you can see it
I can
okay?
see it okay, and you
Yeah,
sound good.
wonderful. So, good morning from Japan. I'm Jonathan. I am a university professor who studies language and literacy education. I've been interested in the library scene for a long time. I've run game libraries at my university. I teach in a lot of public spaces, libraries, and community centers in Japan. And I'm really interested in how progressive I think the American library system is, and building community and also teaching and connecting people through games. And so I've tried to merge sort of traditional language teaching and literacy teaching with this really progressive library space for the teaching that I do here in Japan. There's going to be a document shared in the resources and the chat. I've got tons of materials and papers that I've written, videos that I've done, my lab site, and I'd love to collaborate with some people on some projects as well. So please do take a look at the document. If you leave a comment in the document, I definitely will reply to it. So I'm really interested in building students' characters. So helping them do things in society. So my talk is about building character around games through pedagogy. So I'll start with the games themselves. I'm using tabletop, digital games, folk games, conversation games. But I really think of games as sort of these simulations or models or springboards or experiences or texts or systems, like you'd show a video, like a book club, right? You read the book and then you talk about it to get some deeper understandings of those texts. That's how I use games. We know that games do change people and that people learn by playing. In order to play, we have to learn and change in order to play the game. But pedagogy combined with games changes people a lot more, right? Pedagogy here meaning teaching or instruction. So what is pedagogy and how do I think about it, right? Here's a teaching haiku. Understand students, then teach deliberately, nothing new, just truth. So it's really important to understand who, like in the library, so we have to know who our patrons are. We have to know who the community is. Paulo Freire said, education does not change the world, education changes people, people change the world, right? There's a removed step. I've written about the power of transformation and what transformation is. It's interesting to think about students and community as really trying to understand who people are at the start. So if you look at A, right, who are our patrons and or what kind of community do we want to build, B, and then doing things, C, to get them to that point, right? I think about things like transfer, right? So if I'm playing the electric guitar and I get pretty good at that, and then I pick up a bass, it's pretty similar, right? I understand using strings, using frets. But there's also far transfer, right? So if I'm good at the electric guitar, I might not be as good as transferring those tasks to playing the drums, right? This idea of transfer. Something that I talk about with other teachers is the fact that, yes, games are amazing. Yes, games have all these wonderful affordances and language and things that we can do with them, like Josh just talked about in terms of character. But teachers are also interactive, right? Librarians are interactive. There's so many things that we can do interactively when we combine the best features of games and the best features of teachers and community leaders. And then something that I've played around with other colleagues is this idea of teaching as delicious, right? The method, so why and how we do things for learners or communities, the materials that we use, whether it's worksheets or presentations or showing examples, like the games themselves, right? Blank cards. And then the mediation, like the things that we do as librarians, as teachers, the interactions that we have with students or patrons before, during, and after gameplay, right? Having a conversation with a young girl, having giving a presentation to mediate and structure learning. So that's a quick overview of my teaching philosophy. But again, like on this conference of building character, let's do that. So around games through pedagogy to build character. We play just basically, right? We play roles in society. Like I'm a teacher, I'm a father, I'm a fan, I'm a male. And then we learn those roles in society, right? A lot of these things are learned. I'm learning to be a gardener these days, right? I'm learning a new role in life. I work with a lot of different students, and students can really get hung up on the fact that they think that I'm just a student. They don't see themselves having other roles in society. And so I think teachers and teaching can help students understand, help people understand themselves as things like consumers, or they're voters or non-voters, or male, female, and what those roles mean to them and to others, right? There are different roles that we take. I love this quote: fake it until you make it. Pretend to be somebody until that somebody turns into you. It's a confidence boost. It's acting, right? So a lot of people have said this. And so in my classes and my public projects, I think about building students' characters through acting and also playing. Actors, right? Again, like it's an active thing. People take actions, they do things. It makes the game, whether that's a class or a community group, progress. But acting is often following a role or following the rules. And that's really comfortable for people. But once they sort of get used to that, they can also start to play more, more enjoyably, more socializing, inventing new ways of interacting, being spontaneous and making things up. And so hopefully games and good teaching and mediation gets people to take on different roles. So practically, this is what I do in my classes and my projects. So at the beginning of everything, I work with my students or learners in the community to understand who they are now, right? What kind of roles do you have? What are you doing? What kind of knowledge do you have? And who do you want to be in the future? Like, it's like saying, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? But bringing it really close. Like, you know, do you want to have a better relationship with your brother? Do you want to design your own game? Would you like to remix something? And then taking them through pedagogical steps of playing a game, thinking and discussing, doing research, doing a project to get them to that future. So thinking about literacy as not just reading and writing, but reading games, understanding games and play deeply, and then writing themselves into a project that connects to their participatory future. And so we do all this really interesting stuff. Like, really basically, we play really carefully chosen games. So here's a university student playing Monopoly Junior because she was very interested in being an elementary school teacher. And she wanted to understand the types of literacy practices of elementary school students. And so she's taking notes about the language and the play in this game that's not really for her, but it is for her. Then we use worksheets to discuss ideas and games deeply, right? This idea of debriefing. Here's my students' debriefing of diplomacy. Then my students do research projects to understand language, society, and our lives a little bit more. Here are some students studying the game concentration or matching to understand how short-term and long-term memory works. And then students are participating in society as they want to. So here's a student who has made a game, done an interview with a local newspaper, and is sharing a game to help families be more environmentally conscious. So these are the sort of 4 steps that I'm taking the students through to get them to who they want to be. Okay. So a very quick overview. I teach at the university using the pedagogy of multiliteracies or learning by design, this sort of broad multiliteracies approach. And I've written about it a lot. I'll quickly go over the sequence, and I'll just show you very quickly that in the Google document, so dream, research, play, discuss, on the side, dream, research, play, discuss, analyze, participate, reflect, and plan. All these materials can be remixed, and there's tons of examples. So for example, even here, my students have done all these different projects to become teachers or Renaissance people or influencers, right? Teaching at a high school, right? Looking at roles, being an activist, or thinking about health and happiness, or being a designer or an artist. These are all my students. Being an activist, all these things, being a researcher, being a family maker, or being a fan, right? So the students wanted to be these groups, and so they took these pedagogical steps to become those roles. So there's tons of things all the way down, like worksheets, different roles that they want to take. So close that, make that a little bigger. Right? And so the steps are, right? My students first dream, right? I ask them, who are you and who do you want to become? A lot of education doesn't even ask students this, right? Like I, as a teacher, as a mediator, I want to get to know who they are before I start to do things with them. And so they take some time just to reflect on themselves, which is always good. Then I try to help them adopt a motto for the work that we're going to work on together. So fake it until you make it. I am a student can be really powerful. I tell students, when you're a student, you can go to the newspaper and say, I've worked on this project. I'm an elementary school student. I'm a high school student. You know, do you want to learn more about it? That's actually a source of power for them, right? That's the way that they can use their role to sort of attract attention. One step, one swing, you know, just do things slowly and try to do things carefully. And so my students think of a motto that defines their participatory role work. Then I show lots of dream projects, like games that students have designed before or events that they've run, showing examples, yet allowing for innovation. And there's a whole worksheet on dream projects. Then students have to do a little bit of research, right? Students really, and people really do need sort of job and life literacy. A lot of students don't know what kind of jobs are out there or different lifestyle choices. And so they sort of highlight some dream roles, like I want to be an activist, I want to be healthy, and then they do some more work on that. Like what does being a teacher mean? What values do they have? What challenges do they have in their jobs? Some common roles that my students and community members are doing, like teacher, artist, researcher, influencer, family maker, rich, happy, activist, right? Or just a combination of those things. Then based on who they are, then I help them choose and play some games that match students and their goals. And so we talk about games that they're playing right now. Like if they're playing, I don't know, Dragon Quest 11 and they really like it, we'll play that, right? It's a safe space to do new things in that space. Play this game as a researcher, play this game as an activist. Games about health and happiness, language and literacy, education and learning, games and play and society. I've got a bunch of top 10 examples down in the document, right? And I asked the students to play games as that role. Like, so different groups of students, like maybe a teacher group will approach a game in a certain way, where an activist group will approach a game in the same game in a different way. And so they're playing that role. We take time to discuss the games. So I have a critique or a discussion worksheet. I like to poke students a little bit sometimes and say, so what? So for example, like, oh, how was the game? How was the game, Taro? Taro says, oh, the game was fun. Okay, so what? Who cares? Why is it important that the game was fun? What meaning do you get out of this? And so me as a teacher or an activist is trying to get students to think a little bit more deeply. I try to help students get more curious, right? What are you curious about? I know I've just got a couple of minutes left. Based on their curiosity, they do some analysis work. So thinking about concept maps, connecting games to society, right? This is like taking that bridge to that role in society. Some conceptual work, some language analysis, and then a mini research project. Like, right, what do designers think about when they design character customization screens? My students might go and try to contact a designer or an expert and ask them questions and find the answer to their own questions, right? Developing creativity and curiosity. So they're acting as a researcher or acting as the researcher facet of their specific participation role. Then they participate, right? They brainstorm a project. Maybe that's I want to make a game that teaches about global warming or the Sustainable Development Goals. They'll do a proposal. They'll develop. They'll pilot test. They'll reflect. They'll revise, and then they'll actually do it, right? They'll actually act as their role and report and reflect. So then getting them to the point of acting as a teacher because they organized an event, or acting as a designer because they made a game and uploaded it to Board Game Geek. Then they reflect and plan, right? How have you transformed? What are you going to do next? And how are you acting as the role now? And we debrief that. So that's about all the time I have to overview the worksheet. Again, there's how many pages here? There's 50 pages here of worksheets, examples, games, materials, resources. Please feel free to use this any way you like, and leave a comment, and I'll happily talk you through it more at your own convenience. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was excellent. All
Thank
right.
you.
Amber, are you here? I see you, and
Here and ready.
I can hear you. Thank you so much. If you'll bring your slide up, let's see if we can get the other one down. There we go.
Beautiful.
And you are live. Take it away.
Beautiful. Thank you everyone for joining me for the very last presentation of today's mini-con on ethical character design based on real patron experiences. My name is Amber Sewell. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a teaching and learning librarian and assistant professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I am also a member at large for GameRT, as well as our co-chair of our program planning committee with Molly. Today, I'm going to be speaking as a librarian who designs games for learning and what it means to build characters based on real patron experiences. So a quick outline, I'm going to talk about my background. I'm going to talk about my game idea and my ethical concerns with the game design. And then I'm going to talk about the solutions so far. So a little bit about me. I am a tenure-track academic librarian, which means I am required to do research and scholarship as part of my job. I do have a bit of a scholarship addiction, so I would probably be doing it regardless. I study a lot of different things. I study games and game-based learning, fandom, podcasting as open and accessible scholarship, and information privilege. As a tenure track librarian, one of the things, a common problem is that as not all librarians are required to do research, there aren't tons of classes about that. So in both of my master's degrees, I never took like a research methodologies course. So in 2022, I participated in the Institute for Research Design in Librarianship, which is designed specifically to help solve that problem of people who are required to do research as part of our job, but do not have that educational background. So the project I'm talking about today was the project I used for IRDL. So the idea that started it, I was working at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and Carissa Powell was my former supervisor and always mentor, and information privilege was one of her research areas. And because Carissa is cool and smart, I also decided information privilege was a cool concept. But it is also huge and complex. It is an interdisciplinary concept. It applies to all aspects of our lives, both inside academia and outside. It's important for teachers to know and reflect on because it can really shape how we teach, but it's also important for students to understand how information privilege, shapes their lives. That said, it's really difficult to talk to students about it because the definition would scare anyone off. And if you do any research in information privilege, most of which is done in academic library settings, you'll notice that part of that has manifested as a lot of people talk about information privilege as access. So they'll really focus in on communicating to students that once you graduate, you'll lose access to all of these scholarly sources that some of your student fees are going toward paying for. And while this is really important to talk to students about, I was more interested in that holistic definition of information privilege, of which access is just one piece. So to kind of show you what I mean, this is the original definition of information privilege as coined by Char Booth in their blog in 2014. And it is a solid chunk of text. In the first sentence, we can see why it's important. It situates information literacy in a sociocultural context of justice and access. And then Char breaks down information, what they mean by that, and then what they mean by privilege. And each of these factors are also multifaceted. So if I put up this definition in a class with students and I say, okay, we're really going to break this down, this is a lot. So when you talk to students about this, or you talk to other educators about how information privilege can inform their practice, you just can't start with this definition because it is important, but overwhelming. So the first step I took as part of this research institute was to break the term down into 3 domains. And these are ways that information privilege manifests. So awareness, speaking on students, do they know what resources they're paying for that they have access to? Do they know how it's being paid for or that it costs money? Experience is, what experience do you have doing scholarly research? What does your research experience look like? Do you largely go community-based with your inquiry, or do you seek outside of your community? Access, of course, is those financial barriers, but also access to engaging with the content. As somebody who teaches first and second year students, often they're reading scholarly articles that are not written for them. And so jargon and really intense methodologies can be a barrier to students actually being able to intellectually engage with the content. And so it's important to talk to students about all of these, but for various reasons, the definition is not a place to start. So my solution was to design a game. Explaining information privilege would be super overwhelming. And not only is it overwhelming, but the word privilege makes people feel some sort of way sometimes. And I didn't want to alienate students right off the bat. And I guess an aside on that is that in the recent webinar on information privilege, Carissa Powell and their coworker Jessica Dye did propose some alternative terms for information privilege, like information capitalism or information justice. But regardless, starting with that definition, it's going to be a lot. So my thought was that if students played a game where their characters experienced manifestations of information privilege, that would then give them the context for what we would be talking about next. So what this kind of looks like is students log into a choose your own adventure game. All of the characters are students in the same English 102 class working on the same assignment. And the choices available to the players as these characters are built on different manifestations of information privilege. So our first student here, maybe they are assigned the annotated bibliography and both of their parents went to college. And so their parents are able to say, here's what I did when I worked on similar assignments. I knew to go to the library, to go to my instructor's office hours to talk to them about it. And that kind of shapes the student's end product and their experience researching. Whereas our second player, or our second character that players could choose, perhaps their manifestation of information privilege, the choice that's available to them is to go to a class where they're going to talk really in depth about the assignment and really get to brainstorm with their peers, talk with the instructor. But maybe their parent does not speak English and they need to go to the doctor with them to translate. And so that also is going to impact their research experience. Maybe our third character, their choice is they study best in groups. So they put together a study group with their peer, they're on their way to the library, and they get a text from their boss saying, hey, I had a shift open up, can you come? And so the choice the player then has to make is, do I go study and work on my project? Or do I really need that money this week and I have to go pick up that shift instead? So the idea is that student players encounter scenarios that are familiar either from their own lived experience or what they've heard from their peers or their friends, or maybe it makes them consider experiences they've never really thought of before, like what it means to have caretaking responsibilities and be an undergraduate student as well. So this led to my dilemma of, I had this beautiful vision for a game, but how do I accurately depict student scenarios in an ethical way? I knew I wanted to make it a choose your own adventure, writing from that second person perspective that feels really intimate. And it felt really gross to then be like, I know my lived experience, but I know students are caretakers. So I want that represented in the game, but that's not been my experience. So it just felt like this hurdle of what is the best way to tell this story? And I came up with the idea for this game in 2019, 2020. And this question put this project on hold for years until I applied for IRDL. And I was able to bring this question to a larger group of scholars specifically focused on research methods to help me grapple with it. So it took a lot of deliberation. We talked about a lot of different methods, but ultimately I decided to do kind of a two-part study. So first I conducted a survey for some quantitative data, and then conduct individual student interviews, asking students specifically about the manifestations of information privilege they experience. So I am not using the word information privilege anywhere with students in this survey. Instead, I'm focusing on those 3 domains. So I ask students, where did you struggle with most during this assignment? Have you ever set aside time to work on the assignment, but family or personal stuff got in the way and you couldn't spend the time that you meant to? They've been going really well so far. It's great to actually get a chance to talk to students about their work. Will this method work? I have no idea. I'm still in the beginning stage of data collection, and so it's really hard to know what information students are willing to share. And there isn't a ton of research about this in game design literature, even designing games like educational games, about building a game where characters closely mimic your patron's experience, but doing that in like a non-extractive way. And I still have doubts about my methodology. Like right now, I don't tell students that this is being made to inform character design for a couple of reasons. At first, I didn't think about it. And then when I thought about it, I was afraid it would scare students off. And then ultimately I decided, well, it's not like I'm taking one student's narrative and building a character wholly on that. The goal is to bring together several different experiences and kind of mix them up in a way, because if you're only having 3 characters, you can't really depict the full range of manifestations of information privilege. But also as somebody with anxiety who tends to overthink everything, every time I come across a new inclusive research method, I'm like, oh, maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the better way to do it. So, we're going with it. So my takeaways are research is a super flexible process. I'm trying one tactic. I need a minimum of 11 interviews, and right now I only have 3 students total signed up. So this may be something that lasts into the fall as well. And maybe once I get all of the interviews collected, I found out it didn't give me the right information. So I need to explore other methodologies like having students do vignettes or drawing. But overall, my biggest takeaway has been that although it's more work to take all these steps to ethically gather that data to inform my character design, it can be done if you're willing to put in the trial and error to make it work, especially because there's not a ton of literature out there talking about it. And honestly, I wouldn't have even taken all of these steps had I not been engaged in some of the critical pedagogy discussions that my colleagues who are thoughtful, amazing people bring and involve me in. I don't know that I would have thought about this as a particular barrier 5 years ago. Although time's a lie, so maybe 2019 was 5 years ago, so I guess I was. But hopefully taking all of these steps to make sure that this isn't an extractive process, this is really doing due diligence to students, that the result will be characters and scenarios that resonate with my patrons, making them feel seen and allowing them to make a better connection to both the learning concepts and the libraries. So next steps are to finish the interviews, see what I get, look at the data, see if I've got enough to build those initial characters. If so, the game is to do a low fidelity version of the game, test it before making a higher fidelity version. If there wasn't enough, then I'm going to kind of reevaluate. I was told to kind of check out anthropology as a research branch that really does grapple with the ethics of interviews and using your participant data in other ways. Maybe I'll keep presenting at conferences where other people can give me their great ideas to check out. But yeah, those are my next steps. These are my sources. So we've got a good mix of stuff on information privilege, looking at game design, participatory design in game design is also another avenue that I'm going to be digging more into as I get into building things and maybe reevaluating if I need to talk with students about more information. But yeah, those are my sources. And then I think I am done and we'll turn it over for Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amber. And Jonathan, Josh, if you'd like to be back in video and unmuted for mics, we're going to go roll into Q&A. We do have some questions for everybody, a little bit of questions for everybody. So I'm going to start. Let me pop over the document. To start, for Josh, do you limit or highlight specific modes of game, analog versus digital, when you're recommending games that students investigate?
I think that question may have gone to Jonathan if I look like further
Oh
down.
yeah, the one
Okay.
next. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
apologize. Then
Yeah, it's a
Jonathan.
great question, Liz. So, I teach, and this connects to the question that was below. I teach classes that range from 1 or 2 students to 80 or 90 students, and so it really. I always try to take a survey of what students have on them. A lot of students have smartphones, and so if there's a game that they want to use, like Among Us or Space Team, right, we might use a digital game. But for the most part, I use a lot of tabletop games and free print and play games. Not only because it's cheaper for me as a teacher, I don't have to provide 90 VR headsets, but it also gets students together. Right? I think digital or print and play games, board games, role playing games, one shots like The Quiet Year really get people together. And a lot of my students are not familiar with that. They're very digitally game literate, but not as analog game literate. Yep.
Excellent. So
And it really
actual
just depends on the class. Depends on the class, depends on the context, depends on how much money I have, depends if I've got the hardware. Yep.
yeah. So this question actually for Josh. Apologies. I'm thinking about identity and individuality. Does fostering a level of character customization and individuality help people fit more easily into a larger group? So personal identity bolstering group identity rather than the other way around. Your
Mhm.
thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that it does allow someone to kind of like get into a group far easier than again with everyone just being very stock, very generic. This is one of the major pulls that the entire MMO boom of the early 2000s had with the likes of Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings, you name the property. There was an MMO around it. This idea that it's not you playing as Frodo or Luke Skywalker or whoever. It's you get to be you in a Star Wars world or in Lord of the Rings. And it allows, as another big point, for games that are built on popular properties and IPs, it allows them to greater like communicate with each other. Like, hey, I'm already a fan of this, so these people obviously are already a fan. Like, I can get kind of past that initial barrier of do these people like the same things that I do? And again, as someone who's an introvert, I've had that issue where I don't know what to say when I'm in like a private or a public party. Like, am I going to just start ranting about monetization or about platform or Metroidvanias? Maybe someone really likes Hollow Knight or Dark Souls. I don't know.
I mean, if you get into a roundtable discussion, 100% we are there for you. But this leads kind of to a question for Amber on designing games with kind of an academic point of view. So, how do you think the concept of information privilege could change gaming if game designers were more conscious of it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that's almost the same level of like, how would it change how teachers teach if they were thinking about it? And it's just a lot of, not assuming what a player or student's experience has been before they come to the game. So just making sure it's kind of almost the same as UDL, Universal Design for Learning, of like not assuming what the experience has been. And maybe this is the first game they've ever played. Maybe this is the first time they've ever been in a library. And so kind of making sure that, and as difficult as it is, you want to make it so it's not boring for people who have had a bunch of experience. So making some of those opt-in things, making it scaffolded. So maybe there is, I think we see it in games sometimes where you have like the tutorial level, where if you need time to kind of figure out what the controls do, how do I move about the space, what are kind of my options, that's a good way to scaffold for somebody who's never played this type of game before. But it's optional, and somebody who's played tons of these games can skip it. It's also, you think in terms of access, so making a game available to play offline as well as online, thinking about modality, thinking about mobile versus are they playing with a full screen? Um, I think I don't remember what the teacher taught, but they were talking about showing Pixar shorts in their class.
Hmm.
And they said they specifically did it on the projector so students could note the textures of everything because they're watching it on their phone. And at that level of detail, it's too small for students to think about it. And that's just one way to like not assume students are having the same experience you are.
100% universal design. So kind of still hanging out in pedagogy land. How, Jonathan, did you develop your pedagogical, there we go, got the word out, strategy? And can you talk more about
So yeah, like I have a PhD in ed tech, and at that time I was doing a lot in cognitive science and just using games. So I did a bunch of projects, just have like laboratory research, and I realized that a lot of students weren't learning as much as I wanted them to. And so I started digging into the pedagogy, reading more about effective instruction and how communities of practice works. And after reading thousands of pages, like the pedagogy of multiliteracies, the New London Group, Copen Calansis, the social turn in literacy, surfaced to the top, and I was able to piece together my pedagogical practice by simplifying a lot of the things that they talked about. I mean, Amber talked about critical pedagogy, and that's wonderful stuff. It's a little bit heady sometimes. My background wasn't in that, and so it was a little bit tricky to figure out how. Okay, I understand critical pedagogy, but how do I work with a low-level ESL student to help them do that? And so I really had to translate or transform that a little bit for my context. And so I shared that one of the Q&As was asking about it as well. And I pasted in a paper into that about just simplifying it, right? Of taking these really interesting ideas and really complex ideas of inequality and society and intellectual rigor. And what do you do on Tuesday, right? With the low levels, right? And so it took a lot of time, honestly. And so the paper I shared talks about like the work of reframing and simplifying. And then the MMM is just a way of just a sort of like just a playful shortcut to help people, teachers. I work with a lot of teachers, just think about themselves, right? Maybe a teacher has a really good methodological approach. They're using a task-based language teaching approach. They understand pre-task, task, post-task, but maybe they're not using materials as well as they could, right? Maybe they need a better worksheet, or maybe they need to make something that will help students, in a Discord channel or something. Or as a teacher, maybe just doing more reflective work, or poking, or not poking, but like pushing students a little bit more to articulate more. I think that's a big part of progressive practice, is having students express themselves more, right? That realization and articulation leading to development. And so that MMM is just a handy shortcut to have people think about pedagogy as being delicious and interactive. It's not just the games, it's what we do around the games as well.
Delicious in
Thanks.
games. Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Thank you so much for answering that. And for Amber, so are you picturing this game being used in a one-shot general style ed instruction or more embedded higher level course?
Yeah, definitely. My goal is to kind of have two versions. I would like one that you could do in one shots where you play the game and then there's a live facilitator there to talk about kind of guiding people through the conversation, because it is still a big concept. The game's going to make it a little more accessible, but it's going to make a bigger impact for students if they're able to talk with somebody who can relate it to their exact scenario. But I do also see another version where instead of having the live facilitation, there is explainer text afterwards that kind of breaks down. Here's which character did you choose? Okay, these are the things you experienced, and kind of this is how it relates to information privilege. So I'd like it to be something you can do in person, in a workshop, or in a one shot, but also something that I can publish and then other libraries can use it as like an online digital learning object. Maybe because it's interdisciplinary, it doesn't have to be just libraries and isn't inherently tied to libraries.
Mm.
So I want this something that, like, if you're a sociology professor or you're a psychology professor, or an educator, you can play this game and then tailor your discussion about it to kind of your discipline.
Excellent. Um, there's a question coming in for Josh, but before that, if you were to add kind of character customization to Amber's project, as far as like what might you add to kind of the tailored experience of these characters to make them more realistic for people who are both used to MMOs but also kind of a little bit more immersion? What kind of things would you add? Oh, and that one's for you, Josh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said that was for Amber. I didn't quite get
Oh,
that.
no, no, kind of
Oh,
connecting Amber's
oh,
with your
okay.
area.
Could you repeat the question,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely. So kind of combining the idea of Amber wanting to make kind of characters of real people, what kind of customization do you think Amber might use to make it more realistic for everyone?
Hmm. Well, for personalization for like humans, of course, again, we can talk about aliens and other creatures some other time. Again, what I mentioned on the slide are kind of like the basic stock. So hair color, face or some kind of general expression, body size, body height, different kinds of clothing, eye color. Again, like general things like that are great in terms of like basic personalization. You want it, like, the challenge again, as I said, is that people will always want more. So you want to have as broad of a selection of options for each type as you can. So different hairstyles, different hair colors, different shirts, pants, anything that you can have so that you don't want anyone to be forced to kind of say, well, they don't have my exact body type or my exact hairstyle, so I have to go with this generic one. And it is something that, again, like developers and studios have ran into that problem where they don't put enough in or they limit it. That was one of the major things that happened that Nintendo's got in trouble with, even with the idea of LGBTQ plus representation in their games and trying to open that up over, I think it's been like 5, 6 years since they ran into some controversy that with one of the Pokemons.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And then final question for the session, since we're at time, for both Jonathan and Amber. How do you respond to students who aren't into games as a method for learning when you have very game-heavy kinds of concepts?
Do you want to
And
go
you can
first,
go.
Amber?
Oh,
So I teach a diversity of learners. I have some like retirees that join my classes, and for me it's a lot of things. One is just the framing of it. Like it looks like it looks like we're using games for learning. I say this class is primarily a literacy class, right? And we're going to examine a lot of text and do a lot of language work. Yes, we're using games because of all these reasons, but we're going to do it like the game is maybe 10% of the class. All the literacy practices around the classes are 90%. And so that tends to comfort the students who are there for more traditional learning. To some students who say like, oh, I'm not really a gamer, like I sometimes just say like, well, show me your phone, right? If you don't mind, like you've probably got Angry Birds on there, you've probably got a Match 3, you've probably got something like you're not considering yourself a hardcore gamer, but you've probably played the game of life at some point. You probably played like rock paper scissors the other day. A part of my teaching is to help people understand that gaming and play is a really fundamental part of humanity, right? Whether we're just like telling a joke or a riddle, and so it's not just games; it's also like limericks, and it's poetry, and it's sometimes dance, and it's sometimes artistic expression, which are really like ludically peripheral to games and those sorts of things. And so for me, it's really about trying to be very upfront with promoting a diversity of experiences and a diversity of learning activities. And then students really do tend to get it. Very few students will a few students will drop my class, but most students will stick with it.
excellent. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
and
Amber.
I use games in so many different contexts, but I think in ones where students are not opting in, like they're coming in and I've designed the one shot where it's a game, I always start with explaining why we're playing it. So because I think a lot of frustration with games in academia often comes from experiences where the game was not aligned with the learning outcome
Mm,
or was not
yeah.
explained. And so students and teachers are like, why did we spend all this time doing this? This makes no sense. And sometimes if you wait till the end to make the connection, you've already lost the goodwill. So I always start up front with explaining, here's what we're doing and why. Here is exactly how this game ties into what you were hoping to get out of the class today. And it doesn't always catch everybody, but also just like if I stand up in front and lecture for 40 minutes, I'm also not going to catch everybody. So it's a mix of making the why explicit, and just knowing that like everybody likes to engage differently. You're not going to be able to capture all 25 students in a class the same way. And so sometimes I can build in various levels of engagement. So maybe it's a group and you can kind of take a step back for this parts of it you're not as interested in. But sometimes it's just knowing that like you're going to be on your phone, whether we're playing a game or I'm just talking at you. That's just a part of being a teacher.
There you go. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you all so very much. That is all the time we have for this session and question and answer. So I'm going to go into kind of the final wrap up. As a last reminder, we would love for attendees to provide feedback to our presenters. And so we've decided to incentivize you for our four short questions that we'll ask you to answer. We will be giving everyone who does answer a copy of Quest Giver, a Mosaic Strict single card TTRPG by our own amazing Rebecca Strang. But wait, there's more. For each presenter that you provide constructive feedback for, you can earn a chance to win the Best of Magpie Games bundle that's currently available on Humble Bundle. This bundle includes rulebooks for Avatar Legend, Roots, Mask, the Next Generation, Bluebeard, and so much more. Thank you, audience. Thank you, hosts. Thank you so much, presenters. This has been a fantastic dive into games, character, and all the ways that intersects with our beautiful world of libraries. So don't forget to check out all the slides and resources that we've provided, that our presenters have provided. There's a plethora to be able to explore. Please feel free to keep the questions and conversations going in our Facebook as well as Discord. And this concludes the second annual March MiniCon for GameRTs. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Play forever, and we'll see y'all next year. Bye-bye.